Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Opera in 1953, Opera on Disc, courtesy of Howard Taubman and his How to Build a Record Library. Now, we've already done the A-list of operas, the standard stuff, and I have to confess, I find the B-list vastly more interesting. I really do. What does he say about stuff on the B list? Well, he says, in our own century, there has been a great deal of lively operatic production. This is the 20th century B list, anyway, part of it. Some of it, like Pélias et Mélisande and Wozzeck and Lulu, which are wonderful works in the judgment of most connoisseurs, needs to be approached carefully. It is, frankly, hard going and will yield results of satisfaction only with time, if at all. Well, that's not much of a recommendation, is it? On the other hand, there's nothing difficult about three made in America, Porgy and Bess, the medium, and the Consul, or the Italian I Quattro Rosteghi. Okay, that's interesting. So we'll see what's on the B list after that very equivocal statement. I read that and I just went, oh. I mean, I know it's tough. Yes, Wozzeck. I don't find Wozzeck to be tough going. It's very interesting. I just have to throw this in before we do the B list. Wozzeck is a gripping, humane, deeply moving work. Lulu is harder than Wozzeck. It really is, because the story is so grotesque as well and more complicated. But Wozzeck, I've seen it live now many times, and it's always so moving and powerful and impressive. And, listening to it away from the stage may be a little harder, I think, at first, perhaps. But boy, you sit there and follow it with the libretto, and I just think it grabs you. And there's nothing about it. People say, okay, it's atonal, and yada, yada, yada. It's atonal. But gee whiz, it gets the job done. Boy, does it ever. Anyway, the B list. Aubert, Fra Diavolo. Okay. On Urania, 2 discs. Bellini, La Sonnambula on Cetra, 3 discs. And some of you, we've already talked about the source of all this stuff, post-war radio recordings in Italian, provincials. Some of it was really not very good. This was before the major labels started just tossing out huge, productions of unusual operas with major singers, because it was before, for example, we had Maria Callas. Well, she was sort of starting. This was her decade. And then Joan Sutherland and, all the bel canto people. And so they did all these productions, and Pavarotti and whatnot, it's wonderful productions of all these operas. Before then, you sort of had to take what you could find. And they recommended it anyway. And now we have Berg, Lulu, Columbia, 3 discs, and Wozzeck, Columbia, 2 discs. That was the Metropolis recording, no doubt. And, well, at least they recommended them. Good for them. And then we've got Bizet, the Pearl Fishers, Les Pêcheurs de Perles. It's such a lovely work. I know I told this story before, but I just love it, because I was working in a record shop when I was in college in California, and a woman came running in and she said, I just was listening to something lovely on the radio, and I wanted, it was a record called Angel, and it was sung by Pearl Fisher. Well, obviously it was Bizet's The Pearl Fishers on Angel, the label. And I tried to explain that to her, and she insisted I was wrong and I didn't know what I was talking about, because I wasn't listening to the radio and she was listening to the radio, and it was Pearl Fisher was the singer and the record was called Angel. Well, that was one lost sale. Anyway, Borodin, Prince Igor on Period, the Period label, 3 discs. Probably some sort of Melodia pirate thing or something like that. Charpentier, Louise, no LP. Didn't exist. But, it was nice of them to put in, mentions of these things, even when recordings were not available. Louise, by the way, is a fabulous work. It really is. It was a Beverly Sills specialty, some of you may recall. And there are a couple recordings of it. It's just fantastic. Debussy, Pélias et Mélisande, London, 4 discs. Well, that would be the mono Alcerme, unquestionably. Delibes, Lacme, yay, love Lacme. Giordano, Andrea Chenier on Urania. Handel, Acis and Galatea, Handel Society, 3 discs. I mean, because it was the Handel Society, wasn't going to get that on a major label, were you? Now you can't get it off of labels. There's like thousands of them. And Julius Caesar, Vox, 3 discs, apparently in English, in some warped version, who knows? One of you, I'm sure, knows. Mascagni, Lamico Fritz on Cetra, Minotti, The Consul on Decca, and The Medium on Columbia. Boy, has his star dwindled or tanked or whatever happens to stars when it certainly hasn't gone nova. I mean, nobody cares about Minotti anymore, aside from the Christmas thing, Amal and the Night Visitors. I mean, if that, he was a big name in the 50s. Huge, especially in the U.S., because he was writing opera in English, and they were appearing on television, and they were one-act things, and they were getting performed. And some of them are very good. The Medium and the Consul are not bad. They really aren't. But, oh, baby, how the once mighty have fallen. That's really kind of interesting, isn't it? And then Montemezzi, L'Amour di Tre Re, 3 discs on Cetra. See, now that was one of those Verismo things that it showed up in the Victor Book of the Opera. All the people were doing all of that Verismo stuff in the 20s and 30s, and arias and stuff were being recorded, and the singers existed to do them well. And that opera has completely gone poof. It's kind of like, Francesca da Rimini also, has also disappeared. Some of those other Verismo thingies. And let's see, and Mascagni's Iris. Such as Madame Butterfly, where, except not, where the heroine gets, dumped in a sewer, and oh my goodness. Okay, never mind. Monteverdi, Orfeo, yes. Vox, 1 disc. Not all of Orfeo, evidently. Mozart, Idomeneo, excerpts, HMV, 1 disc. You couldn't get the complete one. No way. Offenbach, The Tales of Hoffmann, Columbia, 3 discs. Ponchielli, La Gioconda, Urania, 4 discs. 4 discs. That's a lot of discs for La Gioconda, isn't it? Puccini. Well, they did almost everything you could do by Puccini before in the A-list. He was an A-lister. But now you get Gianni Schicchi and Il Tabarro, both on Cetra. You do not get Suor Angelica, because Tritico was impossible. And of course, you don't get La Rondine, and you don't get Edgar, and you don't get the first one. I don't even remember whatever it was called. So there you go. Purcell, Dido and Aeneas, HMV, 1 disc. Okay, that's nice. Ravel, L'Heure Espagnole, Vox, 1 disc. Fascinating that you get L'Heure Espagnole, which nobody particularly cares about, but you don't get L'Enfant et le Sortilège, which everybody thinks is fabulous. That's their pick. Rossini, William Tell, Cetra, 4 discs. Okay. Smetana, The Bartered Bride. Well, that's nice to see. Urania, 3 discs. Then we get some more Richard Strauss. Besides Rosenkavalier, we get Salome and Electra. Finally, I don't know why those weren't on the A-list. I can only imagine Salome wasn't because of its rather prurient subject matter, which in 1953, especially for an American audience, I think it would have been a little tricky to try and push that as basic repertoire. You can push, psychosexual, nymphomaniacal hysteria as B-list. Somehow it somehow goes with B-listy, don't you think? But Electra's, pretty straightforward, actually. So that's on Cetra, and Salome is on Oceanic. Okay. Tchaikovsky, Eugene Onegin on Period. Again, they must have had the Russian angle covered. Period must have been a Melodia vehicle at one point or another. 3 discs. Verdi, Ballo in Maschera. It's not called Un Ballo in Maschera. It's just called Ballo in Maschera on Victor, 2 discs. La Forza del Destino. Okay, well, they got the La in the Forza there on Cetra, 3 discs. And Simon Boccanegra, Well, that's interesting. Cetra, 3 discs. Weber, Der Freischütz, London, 3 discs. I would put Freischütz before Fidelio, frankly. I think it's a far more important opera and a better one, never mind. And then Wolf Ferrari, I Quattro Rusteghi, Cetra, 3 discs, probably just because it existed. The other Wolf Ferrari opera is The Secret of Susanna, of course, which is a delicious one-act little confection, which I would have preferred. They should have put that in, or maybe The Jewels of the Madonna, but they weren't available, obviously. So that's your opera B list from Mr. Taubman and Company in How to Build a Record Library in 1953. You would have had a really, let's assume you got all of these things, some really lousy performances of some really second-rate opera, and that's what there was, and you couldn't do better. You really couldn't. It's not like they had options. They didn't have options, and I think it's really kind of nice that they even did a B list, because within a few years, just waited a few years, you probably could have had very fine recordings of most of this repertoire. So it was helpful to that extent. So thanks for joining me, friends. Keep on listening, and let's see what comes next. Wait a minute. Before we go off, opera choral music is next, then chamber music and other stuff. This is fun. I'm really having a good time doing this. I hope you're enjoying it too. Take care.